Your monthly subscription box from Postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. Moto's Minnow is a remarkable streamer pattern that works on a wide range of both warm water and cold water fish. Rather than imitating one bait fish specifically, it seems to imitate many in general. To begin, insert the point of one of the provided hooks into the small hole of one of the gold cone heads. Then, get the assembly firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Pick up the solder wire and pinch one end between the fingertips of your left hand as you take touching wraps around the hook shank with your right. After 10 or so turns, helicopter the wire to break it off close. Slide both the wraps and the cone rearward toward the hook bend. Although not essential, a small amount of your favorite super glue can be applied to the hook shank behind the hook eye. Once the cone and solder wraps are slid forward over top of the adhesive and held for a few seconds, the adhesive will set. This helps to lock the cone and the wraps in place and allows you to tuck in the tail of the wraps without all of them spinning around the shank. The next step is to load a bobbin with the spool of white uni-thread. Get the thread started on the hook shank behind the wire and take a few wraps rearward before snipping off the tag. Continue taking thread wraps to further anchor the wire and to produce a gentle ramp down to the hook shank. A single white marabou feather is used for the tail of the fly. Strip any of the lower, really fuzzy or short fibers free from the stem. The remaining tips should be about the same length. Wetting the feather makes it far more manageable and tie-in much easier. Measure to form a tail a full hook in length and transfer that measurement rearward to the start of the hook bend. While holding the material in the fingertips of your left hand, reach in with your tying scissors and snip the butt end of the feather off, even with the wire. Start taking wraps of tying thread to secure the marabou to the top of the shank. Continue making open spiral wraps rearward, binding it down all the way back to the start of the hook bend. Then advance your thread forward to behind the wire. Pick up the thinner silver wire and lay one end of it against the near side of the hook, like so. Then take thread wraps to secure it all the way back to the base of the tail. Get hold of one of the smaller mallard flank feathers and with its cupped or backside facing you, strip away all the lower fuzzy fibers, then gently preen the lower fibers down. The idea is to isolate the feather's tip, with the tip pointed to the rear of the fly and the concave or cup side still facing you. Strip the upper fibers off the stem. You should be left with something that looks like this. Place the tip against the near side of the hook so it goes over top of the tail and take thread wraps to secure it. Then pull the remainder of the feather back and take a few wraps in front of it, ending with your tying thread at about the midpoint of the hook shank. Pull a small amount of pearl angel hair free from the packet and use it to create a thin dubbing noodle on your tying thread, about 3 inches in length. Start taking wraps with the noodle so the dubbing begins at the base of the tail, and keep taking touching wraps to build up the rear half of the fly's body. When you get to bare tying thread, get hold of the mallard flank feather's stem, and while preening the fibers back, start making open spiral wraps up the hook. When you reach your tying thread, use it to anchor the stem, then snip the excess off close. Now pick up one of the larger mallard flank feathers and prepare it in the same manner as you did the first. Once the feather's prepped, get it tied in using the same procedure you did before. Take thread wraps in front of the feather, then forward to about the wire wraps. Repeat the same dubbing procedure as before to produce another thin 3-inch long noodle on your tying thread. Take wraps with the noodle to build up the front half of the fly's body, ending with your tying thread at the back edge of the cone. Now get hold of the second flank feather and wrap it in the same way as you did the first. Then anchor its stem and snip the excess off close. Gently preen the mallard flank fibers slightly forward before getting hold of the silver wire and carefully making open spiral counter wraps through the fibers. Do your best not to trap fibers as you go. The wire will add a little bit of flash to the pattern, but also helps to protect the delicate feather stems. When you reach your tying thread at the back of the cone, use it to firmly anchor the silver wire. This stuff is pretty sturdy, but a small pair of wire cutters makes snipping off the excess a breeze. Take thread wraps to clean up and flatten the area immediately behind the cone in preparation for the next step. Get hold of one of the white saddle hackles and with its front or convex side facing you, strip away all the lower fuzzy fibers, then many of the fibers from the top of the stem. Trim the stem off, leaving about 1/8 of an inch of bare stem for tie-in. Place that bare stem against the near side of the hook and take thread wraps to secure it. Begin making touching wraps forward with the feather, preening the fibers rearward as you go. When you reach the back edge of the cone, take wraps of tying thread to firmly anchor the feather's tip, then carefully reach in with your tying scissors and snip the excess tip off close. Take a few more wraps behind the cone to help angle the fibers back a little. You can then reach for your whip finish tool and use it to complete a 5 or 6 turn whip finish, seat the knot well, and snip or cut your tying thread free. Although the fly is looking pretty good right now, there's still a couple of things to do. A small drop of head cement applied to the thread wraps behind the cone will ensure they don't come unraveled. A fine point dubbing needle works well for separating the mallard flank fibers and kind of fluffing out the fly. Who knows exactly what makes this pattern so effective, but what's for sure is you can never have enough of them.